I am 52 years old now. I have a son of my own, 17 years old. Same age I was when my father sat me down at the kitchen table one evening and said something I did not fully understand until I needed it desperately 3 years later. I tell this story to my son the way my father told me things, not as instruction, not as warning, but as truth. Here is what happened. Here is what I learned. Here is what I hope you never need and will always remember. This is what happened in the summer of 1991 in a hospital room on the fourth floor of St. Mercy Medical Center when I was 19 years old and completely unprepared for everything except one thing. One thing my father had already prepared for me. Thomas Allen Patterson built his company with one truck and 30 years of early mornings. Patterson and Crane Mechanical Services, founded 1988 with his business partner Victor Crane, equal split. Two men who had worked together for 6 years before that and trusted each other, or so my father believed, enough to build something permanent. My father was the work. Victor was the money. That was how my father described it. Thomas knew every job site, every client, every crew. Victor managed accounts, invoices, contracts. Two different men with two different skills, and for a long time that had been enough. I grew up watching my father leave before sunrise and return after dark and never once complain about it. He was not a man who complained. He was a man who prepared. In the spring of 1988, I was 16, I came home from school to find my father sitting at the kitchen table with a piece of paper in front of him. He had been in a meeting with Victor that afternoon. Something had been said. I never learned exactly what. He looked up when I came in. "Sit down, James," he said. "I want to tell you something." He said 3 things. I remember them exactly because I repeated them to myself for 3 years without understanding why. Victor is my partner, but he is not my friend. There is a difference between those 2 things, and it matters. He looked at the paper in front of him. If anything ever happens to me, before you sign anything, before you agree to anything, before you say a single word to anyone about the business, you call James Whitfield. He's my attorney. His number is in my desk. Top drawer, red address book. He looked at me directly. No matter what time it is, no matter what anyone tells you, no matter how urgent they say it is, you call Whitfield first. Do you understand? I said yes. I was 16 years old. My father was 44 and healthy, and the idea that I would ever need this information felt distant and abstract and slightly dramatic. I said yes and went to do my homework and thought very little about it. On my 18th birthday, my father gave me 2 things: a watch that had belonged to his own father, and a document James Whitfield had prepared, a limited power of attorney authorizing me to act on my father's behalf in business matters if he was ever unable to do so himself. "Keep it," he said. "You'll probably never need it." He said it the way a man says something he knows is not true, but hopes will be. In February of 1991, my father collapsed at a job site. Stroke. Severe. He was 49 years old. He survived, but the stroke had taken his speech and most of his movement. He lay in a bed on the 4th floor of St. Mercy and understood everything around him and could communicate almost nothing. My mother sat beside him every hour she was permitted. I came every morning before work and every evening after. On the 3rd day, Victor Crane came. I was in the room when he arrived. My mother had stepped out to speak with Dr. Reeves in the corridor. It was late afternoon. The light through the hospital window was the particular gray of winter. Victor was 52 years old, well-dressed. He had been to the hospital once before, the first day, and had said the right things to my mother and shaken my hand and expressed the appropriate concern. Today he was carrying a folder. He sat in the chair beside my father's bed. He spoke to my father directly, as though I was not present, as though I was furniture, as though I was a 19-year-old boy who did not need to be addressed. "Thomas," he said, "I hate that it's come to this. I genuinely do. But the business needs continuity. You understand that better than anyone." He opened the folder. "I've had documents prepared. A transfer of your 50% to me, temporarily for operational continuity, until things become clear, until we know what the situation is." He placed the papers on the tray beside my father's bed, put a pen on top of them. "I need your signature, or someone authorized to sign on your behalf." He looked at me then. For the first time since entering the room, "Your father and I built this company together," he said. 22 years working side by side. Whatever you think of this moment, that is real. I am trying to protect what we built." I looked at the pen on the tray. He had brought a pen to my father's hospital room. I looked at my father. He was looking at me. He could not turn his head far, could not speak, could not lift his hand. But he had turned his head, the small movement that was available to him, and he was looking at me with an expression I have spent 33 years trying to describe accurately. It was not fear. It was not desperation. It was the look of a man who had already done everything he could and was now watching to see if it was enough. He had prepared the address book. He had prepared the power of attorney. He had sat me down at a kitchen table when I was 16 years old and told me 3 things he needed me to remember. He was looking at me to find out if I had remembered. I stood up. "I need a moment," I said to Victor. I walked into the corridor. My hands were not steady. My heart was doing something I could feel in my throat. I was 19 years old, and I had never done anything like what I was about to do, and I was terrified in a way I had never been before or since. I found Uncle Paul, my father's brother, sitting in the waiting area at the end of the hall. I told him in 4 sentences what was happening. He stood up without asking questions and walked with me to the elevator. We went to my parents' house. Top drawer of my father's desk. Red address book. J. Whitfield. The number written in my father's handwriting. I called from the kitchen phone. Whitfield picked up on the second ring. I said, "My name is James Patterson, Thomas Patterson's son. Victor Crane is at the hospital right now with papers. My father can't speak." A pause. "Don't let anyone sign anything," Whitfield said. "I'll be there in 40 minutes." I drove back to the hospital. Victor was still in my father's room when I returned. He had been waiting, patient, certain. I stood in the doorway. "My father's attorney is on his way," I said. "Nobody is signing anything today." Victor looked at me. Something shifted in his face. Not collapse, not panic, but recalibration. The expression of a man who had arrived with a plan and was now calculating what the new situation meant. "James." "His attorney is on his way," I said again. Victor closed the folder. He looked at my father one more time, Then he left. Whitfield arrived 38 minutes after my call. He reviewed Victor's documents in the corridor. His face told me something before his words did, a particular stillness that lawyers get when they have found something significant. These transfer documents, he said quietly, are based on a company valuation that is significantly below actual value. Someone has been systematically underreporting assets. He looked at me. James, how old are you? 19, I said. He nodded slowly. Your father chose well, he said. My father died on a Thursday morning. My mother was beside him. I was beside him. The light through the window was the same winter gray. He never knew what Whitfield found. He never knew about the 14 months of legal proceedings that followed, about the civil fraud case, about Victor Crane losing his 50% in a court settlement that Whitfield described as one of the cleaner outcomes he had seen in 30 years of practice. He never knew that the company survived, that my mother ran it for 4 years before I was ready to run it myself, that it is still running today under the name my father gave it, with his name first. But I think he suspected. I think that was why he sat down at a kitchen table in the spring of 1988 and told a 16-year-old boy 3 things to remember. He suspected what Victor was. He could not prove it yet, but he prepared for it with the same quiet thoroughness he brought to everything, because that was who he was. A man who worked before sunrise and came home after dark and never complained and always prepared. Over the weeks following his death, my phone recorded 67 missed calls. 21 from Victor directly. His tone moved through those calls the way certainty moves when it meets resistance. First aggressive, then negotiating, then something quieter and more careful. 31 from Victor's lawyer. Formal, measured. The language of a man trying to find a settlement before discovery revealed everything. 15 from a business associate of Victor's whose name I did not recognize and whose calls I did not return. Whitfield handled every one. My son is 17 years old. He has his grandfather's eyes, the particular quality of attention in them that I recognized the first time I held him. I told him this story last year. All of it. The kitchen table in 1988, the red address book, the hospital room, the pen on the tray, the 40 minutes. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Were you scared? He asked. Completely, I said. I had no idea what I was doing. I only knew one thing. Call Whitfield first. That was all I had. That was enough, he said. That was everything, I said. Your grandfather made sure of that. My son looked at me. What was the difference, he said, between a partner and a friend? I thought about my father at that kitchen table, 44 years old, just home from a meeting that had told him something he had not wanted to know about a man he had worked beside for 6 years. A partner, I said, needs something from you. A friend wants something for you. Your grandfather knew which one Victor was. My son nodded slowly, the same nod my father used to give when something was worth keeping. I recognized it immediately. Rest easy, Dad. I remembered everything. Thomas Patterson never got to see what happened next. He never knew about the fraud case. He never knew his son made the right call. He never knew that everything he had built was still standing. But he had already done his part. years before that hospital room, at a kitchen table, with 3 things a 16-year-old boy needed to remember. That is what real preparation looks like. Not wealth, not power, not connections. Just a father who knew his son might one day stand alone in a corridor, terrified, 19 years old, with no idea what to do, and made sure he had exactly one thing to hold on to. One phone number, one instruction, one moment of trust placed years in advance. If this story stayed with you, if you thought of something your own father told you that you didn't understand until you needed it, leave it in the comments. Just one memory, one thing he said. I read every single one. If you believe a father's preparation is the most powerful thing he can leave his child, hit that like button. Share this with someone who had a father like Thomas, or someone who is trying to be one. And if you want more stories like this, stories about ordinary people who prepared quietly and loved deeply and left something permanent behind, subscribe to Lauren's Story. Every week we tell these stories because they deserve to be told. James remembered. See you in the next one.